Tonight we are looking at 3 horrifying caving stories that went horribly wrong. A diver slips 5 meters past the limit of his own gas in the deepest spring in France. A falling stone breaks a leg a kilometer under Germany, and one man becomes the only telephone the mountain has. And a desert storm collapses the only way out of Pannikin Plain, with 5 cavers still inside. Each story starts with confidence and ends in chaos. As always, viewer discretion is advised. True. On June 20th, 2026, Julien Mercier waded into the cold green pool of Fontaine de Vaucluse in France, the deepest spring in the country and one of the deepest on Earth. A flooded shaft that has swallowed probes past 300 meters and never shown anyone its floor. He planned a tidy 40 minutes, down the great slope to 40 meters, photographed the old survey line, and home for dinner in the village above the spring. Julien was 36 years old, a technical diver who had logged 400 dives across a decade of French springs. His club knew him for a habit as fixed as the tides. Every tank he owned wore a strip of tape with the gas and its depth ceiling written in his own block capitals. Because a label, he liked to say, is a contract. That morning the plan was modest, and the tank on his back carried the rich mix he loved for shallow work, with a ceiling of 40 meters, written on the tape in his own hand. Here is what you need to understand about the Fontaine. It is not a cave with rooms, it is one enormous throat. A sunlit pool at the foot of a cliff, and below it, a single shaft plunging into the dark at 45 degrees, so smooth and so wide that divers call it the toboggan. And rich oxygen mixes have one law. The gas that feeds you at 20 meters becomes poison under pressure. Past its ceiling, oxygen attacks the brain itself. No warning taste, no slow build you can bargain with. The dive opened in postcard light, the green of the pool giving way to the blue of the shaft, his exhaust hissing up the smooth stone ceiling and silver ropes. He fell slowly down the toboggan with 200 bar on his back, unhurried, happy, the old survey line running beside him like a handrail. At 30 meters, he leveled off and framed his photographs, right on plan, right on time. Below him, that is when the shaft showed him something new, a pale shape on the slope near 50 meters, canvas and metal, half buried, gear shed by some expedition decades ago. He hung at his ceiling and looked down at it, and the arithmetic in his head quietly failed him, because a wreck with a story is the one bait a photographer cannot price. 5 more meters, 1 minute, 1 photograph. What he didn't know, tipping past the number on his own tape, at that depth, his rich mix was already crossing its limit, and that photograph would cost him everything. The contract on the tank was written in his own handwriting, and he was about to break it. He dropped to the wreckage and framed the shot, 45 meters. His jaw seized once. The camera slipped. Because this is oxygen past its ceiling. It does not warn, it detonates. A convulsion that seizes every muscle at once, and a regulator that falls from a mouth that can no longer hold it. 45 meters down the throat of the deepest spring in France, the seizure took him whole. Watch the ledger on the slope. 140 bar still on his back, a tank more than half full. A buddy 30 meters above, counting the minutes of a photo stop. And a regulator drifting beside a man whose body could not answer the only question that mattered. His buddy saw the lamp go still and dropped fast, hand over hand down the survey line, his own gauge clicking through numbers he would not remember. At 45 meters he found Julien rigid against the slope, regulator out, eyes open. He did the drill exactly. Mouthpiece back, purge, head tilted, and the long haul upward with a man twice his drag. Put yourself on that rope for 1 minute. 9 minutes of ascent to manage. A friend in your hands who is all weight and no help. And the cruel physics of the rescue. You cannot rush a body upward through water without breaking it a second way. He surfaced with Julien in the green light of the pool at minute 19, shouting before his mask was off, and the tourists at the rail became a rescue chain, a village that has pulled divers from its spring for 80 years. It was not enough. Julien Mercier died at the edge of the sunlit pool with a tank half full, 5 meters past a ceiling he had written himself. The seizure had opened his airway to the water, and the shaft had done the rest on the way up. The inquest ruled the death oxygen toxicity, on a convulsion at 45 meters on a mix labeled for 40, and printed the sentence his club now reads aloud before every spring dive. The ceiling is not where the danger begins, it is where your contract with the gas ends. His tanks hang in the clubhouse in Provence today, tape still on them, his block capitals still legible, and the verdict framed beside them names the gas and the depth and nothing else. The last photograph was never recovered. The camera lies on the slope at 45 meters, beside the wreckage a man died to frame. The deepest spring in France still glows green under its cliff every summer evening. Divers still fall down the toboggan with contracts on their backs. And the first thing the only club that dives there teaches you is a dead man's handwriting. The label is the dive. 5 meters is not a photograph. It is a different gas. True. On July 4th, 2026, Anton Keller dropped into the cold mouth of the Riesending in Germany, the deepest and longest cave in the country, a fissure in a high alpine meadow that falls more than 1,000 meters into the mountain, a system so deep its expeditions sleep underground in camps. He went in with one partner for a 5-day survey rotation, carrying food, bolts, and the casual confidence of a man on his 9th trip down. Anton was 33 years old, an expedition caver who had logged 9 descents of the great alpine systems, and the clubs knew exactly what he was: the fittest man on any rope, a former mountain runner who trained for caves by racing the stairwells of Munich towers. His partner, Stefan, 20 years older, called him the Horse. The plan was a quiet one: 5 days at the deep camp, surveying a new gallery at 900 meters, out by Friday for beer at the Trailhead Inn. Here is what you need to understand about the Riesending. Getting in is falling with a rope, and getting out is a mountain climbed from the inside. Dozens of pitches stacked on canyons, stacked on crawls. A strong team needs half a day each way, and there is no shortcut, no side exit, no signal. Whatever happens at the bottom, the only telephone the mountain has ever had is a human being climbing out with a message. The descent ran like a well-worn ritual. 12 hours of rope work and canyon, the two men trading leads down pitches they had named on earlier trips, boots scraping on wet limestone, echoes rolling down ahead of them like scouts. They reached the deep camp on schedule and slept their first night a kilometer under the meadow. The survey opened well, a clean gallery, virgin passage, the tape hissing out into rooms no light had ever touched. On the second morning, in a boulder canyon they had crossed a dozen times, that is when the mountain moved. A single stone, no bigger than a fist, letting go from somewhere high in the black. It struck Stefan below the knee, and the sound told the story before the pain did, and the expedition's arithmetic quietly failed. Because a cave this deep has no half injuries. 2 men, 1 working leg, and a mountain of rope between them and the sky. What he didn't know, splinting his partner's leg with a survey stake and tape, the hard part was not the first aid. And that stone would now cost a 12-hour climb through darkness. The message had exactly 1 body left to ride in, and it was his. Stefan could not stand. The radio did not exist. Panic offered its services. Both men declined. They ran the doctrine instead, because alpine caving has a cold plan for exactly this. The injured man goes nowhere, warm, fed, anchored at camp, and the healthy man becomes the runner. And the runner's rule is crueler than it sounds. He must climb fast enough to matter and slow enough to arrive. A second casualty on the ropes does not speed the rescue, it ends it. Watch the split he carried out of camp. 1,000 meters of vertical, alone, on legs already 2 days tired. 12 hours as the target, 16 as the fear. And a partner behind him in a sleeping bag, doing long division on 4 days of food, one working leg, and the sound of the stone he could still hear. Anton climbed the mountain from the inside, one pitch at a time. Ascenders biting, rope clicking through, 60 meters, 90 meters. The canyons walked on wet ledges with the care of a man carrying something breakable. Put yourself inside that climb for 1 minute. Your headlamp is the whole world. Your friend is a kilometer below you, exactly as safe as your footwork. And every anchor you clip is a place where hurrying could make you the second stone. At 6 hours, he passed the halfway ledge and ate chocolate in the dark, hands shaking. At 9 hours, the pitches shortened, and his pace was still even, the stairwells of Munich paying their dividend. At 11, he smelled it before he saw it, meadow air falling down the shaft like cold water. He surfaced into an alpine evening after 11 hours and 40 minutes, legs done, message intact, and ran the last kilometer of wet grass to the hut with the emergency number already dialed against a signal he did not have yet. The mountain answered, the way this mountain famously does. Within a day, cave rescue teams from 4 countries were flowing down the Riesending in relays, a bolted stretcher line growing pitch by pitch toward the deep camp. They reached Stefan on the second evening, warm, anchored, furious about the beer he was missing, and brought him up through the mountain in a 3-day carry that never hurried and never stopped, because the rescue that rushes is the rescue that has already failed. Stefan survived with a plated shin and a story for every trailhead inn in Bavaria, and the expedition report ruled the operation a textbook runner rescue and printed the split that made it one. 11 hours 40 minutes, 1,000 meters, 0 shortcuts taken. The report's last line has been read at every Riesending briefing since, and it is about the man who climbed, not the man who fell. The runner's job is not to be fast, it is to arrive. Speed is only the shape arriving takes. The deepest cave in Germany still opens in a high meadow you could walk past without seeing, and Anton still races tower stairwells in Munich on winter nights. The young cavers ask him what he thought about for 12 hours alone in the dark. Nothing, he tells them. I counted anchors. A runner who is thinking about the bottom is not watching the next clip, and the message only arrives if he does. On February 8, 2026, Ruth Calloway led 4 cavers down the collapsed doline of Pannikin Plain in Australia, a hole in the hot, flat skin of the Nullarbor, the only entrance that cave has ever offered, a ramp of ancient rockfall dropping from desert glare into cool limestone dark. Above them stretched a desert that measures its rain in years. Below them ran galleries carved by water, with nowhere else on the plain to go. Ruth was 54 years old, an expedition leader who had logged 30 years of Nullarbor caving, and the community spoke of her the way sailors speak of harbor pilots. Her rule was famous and inflexible. Before anyone went underground, she called 3 weather stations, not 1, 3. Because on a plain this flat, she liked to say, rain anywhere is rain here. The plan was 2 days in the far galleries, and all 3 stations that morning had said the same clean thing. Nothing for 7 days. Here is what you need to understand about the Nullarbor. It is one limestone slab the size of a country, flat as a table, with no rivers on its surface at all. When rain does come, it does not flow away. There is no away. It finds the holes. A doline like Pannikin's is not just a door, it is a drain, and the desert above it is a roof, so rare a storm crosses it once in a decade. The first day ran sweetly. The party moved down the rock pile ramp and out along the great galleries, boots pattering on dry stone dust, lamps swinging over walls that had not seen weather since the Ice Ages. They surveyed for 8 hours and camped on a sandbank deep in the main passage. 5 people eating pasta 100 meters below a desert evening. Near midnight, that is when the plain betrayed its forecast. Far to the northwest, a decaying cyclone wandered inland and stalled, and rain that the desert sees once in a decade began falling on a slab with no rivers. The first sign underground was a sound, a soft knocking of stones somewhere up the galleries, and under it, a hiss that did not stop. Because somewhere above them, the drain had started drinking. The forecast had already failed. What she didn't know, sitting up in the dark to listen, the storm was pouring a decade of rain into one doline. And that turn would do worse than flood them in. The soaked rock pile ramp, the only stairway out, was about to let go of the wall. The hiss grew into a river, and the river reached their sandbank. Then the mouth fell. They were trapped, all 5 of them. The crash of the collapsing ramp rolled down the galleries like a door slamming in a giant's house, because saturated rockfall does not hold. The boulders that had been a staircase for 30 years rearranged themselves in 9 seconds. And the water kept coming, brown and patient, rising through the passage toward 5 people whose exit had just become a puzzle of moving stone. Watch Ruth's ledger in the rising dark. High ground first, a ledge gallery 3 meters up, reached by headlamp. All 5 counted twice. Water rising a hand width every 20 minutes and slowing. A surface team due to miss them in one day. And between them and the sky, 40 meters of collapsed rock pile that might move again if breathed on wrongly. She ran it like the harbor pilot she was, and the ledge became a small, strict country with laws that fit on one breath. Stove up to the ledge. Wet clothes wrung and shared. Lamps cut to 1, burning in rotation. Hours counted out loud. Put yourself on that ledge for 1 hour of it. The brown water below you, holding its new level like a promise it might break. The dark above you, full of stone that has already moved once. And a leader beside you doing arithmetic out loud, calm as a shipping forecast. At 6 hours, the water stopped rising. At 10, it began, grudgingly, to fall. And at 14, Ruth did what her 30 years had built her to do. She took the 2 strongest, roped them to a belay she trusted, and read the new rock pile like a text, stone by stone, testing, listening, choosing a seam along the wall where the collapse had wedged itself tight. It took 5 hours to climb 40 meters. Every boulder was interviewed before it was trusted. Twice the pile groaned, and the party froze on its rope like statues in a museum of bad ideas, waiting out the stone's opinion. Ruth surfaced into a desert washed clean at dawn, 20 hours after the mouth fell, and stood in the impossible smell of wet saltbush while her party came up the seam behind her, one careful shape at a time. The surface team arrived that afternoon to find 5 cavers asleep in the shade of the trucks and a doline they did not recognize. All 5 survived, and the expedition report ruled the escape a leadership case study and printed its numbers without decoration. 20 hours, 40 meters of live rock pile, 5 for 5 out of the mouth of Pannikin Plain. The only entrance that Pannikin Plain ever offered is gated after the collapse, and the report's last line is the reason every Nullarbor briefing now ends with the weather said differently. The desert does not get storms, it saves them. Ruth still calls 3 weather stations before every trip, and now she calls them for caves she is not even visiting. The young leaders ask her what the storm taught her, and the harbor pilot in her answers with the ledger. The forecast failed, the doctrine did not. High ground, 1 lamp, count your people twice, and never argue with a rock pile. You interview it, she says. It answers slowly.